Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a new video for you in which I'm going to demonstrate owl eyes in pastels. So I'm going to mix time-lapse pieces and real-time pieces with each other so that I can show you everything really detailed but also not make the video too long. So this is going to be in half an hour video. I think the eyes in real time took me about 2 hours, maybe a little less, 1.5 hours. So yeah, I hope you'll enjoy this video. The full real-time version of this tutorial, of course, is available on my Patreon. So if you're interested in following this owl along, have a look on there. The link is in the description. So let's get started. I have brown Pastelmat. It's about 6 by 9 inches, I would say, and I'm going to use Stabilo pastel pencils and Faber Castell Pit pastel pencils. Those are my two favorite pastel pencil brands. So what I'm doing first is sketching out the eyes and also the beak, but for this video we'll do the eyes only. I did have some really thin, light sketch lines down already, which I did with graphite, but they were almost invisible, so I had to redo them with this gray pastel pencil just so I could see them a little bit better. So this is a Faber Castell Pit pencil. It's a dark gray, a more cooler gray, I would say. And I'm doing the sketch lines with this instead of black because this is more easily adjustable or erasable compared to black. But in the end, of course, I am going to be working with a lot of black. So I'm sketching out the iris, the eyelids and the pupil, and then the beak before I get started with the coloring process. It's really important to have the sketch lines mapped out really well so that you know what you're starting with. Sketching out the basic lines of the beak here. And for the sketch lines you can freehand, of course. I'm freehanding here on top of the very basic lines I had already down with the graphite. Of course you can also use with the grid. You can also work with the grid or you can trace. Any method is okay. It's very important to have the proportions correct before you start with the coloring. Okay, and then I'm going to start mapping out the shape of the highlights in the eye. I like to start with those because otherwise I might forget them. And I'm working on a dark undertone, a dark paper, so the highlights stand out really well. I'm using a light gray Stabilo pencil. So the highlights are almost never completely white. In this case they were more of a gray tone with a lot of blue in it as well. So I sketched out the shapes of those in both eyes, and then I already added some blue, but I'll be adding more blues on top later. Then after mapping out the basic shape of the highlight, I'm going to do the coloring of the iris. I'm going to use multiple tones of orange and yellow, also some purple, some darker colors to get a really nice contrast in the eye, and I want to get them really vibrant as well. Using this medium orange tone first, I'm starting out with the base tone of a medium color so I can add the darker and the lighter colors on top of that. And I'm just putting down a light layer. So I'm not pushing too hard, just a very light layer to cover most of the paper. But as I'm planning on adding a lot of colors on top, I don't want to saturate the paper just yet. Otherwise, it will be a lot harder to add the lighter colors on top especially. I'm also leaving open the top part because I want to start with a darker base tone there. Going to use a darker orange for the top half. Also putting down a light base layer of that, and then I'll make it transition into the lighter orange by just going on top of it a little. I'm keeping it quite loose for the base layers. I am going to clean up the shape of the highlights a little bit with this color. And now it's time for the colors on top. So I'm taking this very vibrant red from Faber Castell. I feel like the Faber Castell colors are a little more vibrant. And they layer a little better, I feel. So I'm layering this bright red on top of the top half of the iris, and I'm taking it down a little bit as well. But I'm trying to keep that bottom half quite light. I really want a nice contrast between the top half and the bottom half. The top half is in shadow because the eyelid and the feathers are covering that part of the eye, so there's a shadow cast over the top of the eye, the top half, which makes the top half really dark and the bottom half really light. I'm taking this dark purple now. It's very similar to Caput Mortem Violet from the Polychromos, using that on the top half and also a little bit around the iris to create the rounded shape. And then now I have the dark colors in, I want to get back in with the lighter colors to add the details. So you can see quite a lot of veins in the eye. So I added some of those veins and lighter details. And now with a very bright red, I'm going in between those. And I'm making the iris really vibrant now. So I'm not doing a lot of blending yet, especially in very small areas like this. I don't like to do a lot of blending. I just try to blend with the pencils themselves by working in light layers and making the colors transition into each other. Going back in, enhancing the dark shadow on the top half, using a very dark red now from Stabilo. Now I'm going in with blue, so a dark blue. I don't want to use brown or black in the eye or on the shadow, because that will make it look very flat. So I'm going in with purples and blues. That way you can create really nice vibrant browns without actually using brown. The only blending I do with my finger is a little bit of a dotting motion when I want to fade out details a little bit, but I'm not smudging. I'm just tapping a little bit. Now I want to hype up the vibrancy even more. So I'm going in with the bright red again. I can't remember exactly the color numbers. In the tutorial on Patreon I do have a color list and I mentioned the color numbers in the video as well. But now that I have to do a voiceover, I don't really remember anymore. I do show them a little bit on camera. Going in with a bright yellow now, there's a bright circle around the pupil, so I'm putting that in with the yellow. And with the yellow I'm also putting in some of the lighter veins in the eye. I'm still using quite light pressure, so I'm not really pushing hard. As long as you keep your layers light, you don't have to push a lot to be able to make the light color stand out on top of the darker colors. Now for the pupil, I'm going in with black. So the pupil is never completely black, not here, but also in other animals. You can always see some kind of tone or hue in the pupil that's not black. But I'm starting out with a base layer of black, and then on top of that I'm going to put colors, purple colors and blue tones to get a little bit more depth in the pupil. Using the black from Faber Castell, I find that a little bit easier to handle compared to the black Stabilo. And I'm keeping the base layer quite light. So as you can see, I don't completely fill up the paper so that I can still add other colors on top. Cleaning up the shape of the highlights as well. And brightening up the circle around the pupil. I keep looking at my reference, comparing the shapes, see if the pupil has the right shape. Now I'm going on top with that dark blue again. This one is very similar to dark indigo from Polychromos. Then I'm adding the dark purple on top to create a very nice tone. And then I'm going in again with black to darken up some of the areas. But I do keep some areas a bit lighter. I let the purple and the blue show through. And then the pupil is finished. Now with the dark gray I started out with from Faber Castell, I'm starting to darken up the top half of the eye even more, as I felt it was still a little bit too light. And then it's time to do the final details in the eye, using this very bright beige now to lighten up some of the details even more. And now I also need to finish the highlights, so it does need a lot more color, more blue. So I'm going to use several different blues, starting out with this really nice cobalt blue and a more ultramarine blue tone from Stabilo. I'm going to start out with those, and then I also pick a darker blue from Faber Castell. And this purple from Faber Castell as well. I'm going to darken up the top half of the highlight, as that part is also in shadow. And I'm adding very little pressure because I don't want to make it too purple or too dark. So I just add a little bit of that just to change the tone a little bit. Then I'm going in with this really nice cobalt blue tone from Stabilo and I add that on top, especially on the top part. You can see what kind of a difference that makes. It makes the eye pop a lot more. Now some very, very bright blue. Don't use too much of that, just a little. Of course, the eyes always reflect the colors of the surrounding areas of the environment. And the highlight here is reflecting some of the sky, some of the colors of the sky, which is why there's blue and purple in it. And I'm adding some brighter spots with this very light beige. And then you can also see some of the reflections of the dark feathers in the eye. It's almost some kind of lashes. So I'm drawing the shapes of those lashes in the highlight and on the top half of the eye. I'm not doing that with black, I'm doing that with dark blue. Then the eye itself is finished, so then it's time to move on to the eyelid. Taking black now, because the eyelids are very dark. I'm going to draw around the iris. Only filling in the darkest areas now. Then I'm going to take a lighter gray color and fill in the lighter areas on the eyelid. This will make them pop forward a lot more. And then the dark gray from Faber Castell again. And filling in the rest of the eyelid. Now I have a really nice undertone. Then I can add the lighter details on top of that. Let's add some color now. I'm adding dark blue. And even in very dark areas like this, I try to add as many different colors as I can to make it as realistic as possible. Just adding black or just adding gray will make something look very flat. Alright, that was the first eye. So now it's time to move on to the second one, and I'll be doing the second one in exactly the same way as I did the first one. So starting out with the iris, with the top half and the bottom half, a lighter color on the bottom half and a darker color on the top half, exactly the same colors. Adding the dark blue now on the top half, the dark red. Very difficult to name colors. Still keep my layers quite light, I keep my pressure light doing most of the blending with the pencils themselves and not with another tool or with my fingers. I do like blending with my fingers, but in smaller drawings like this, it's just not really useful. It will fade out the details too much. Going in with the dark purple again, darkening up the top half of the iris. Now I'm dotting with my finger just to blend in the colors into the paper a little bit more, but I don't want to saturate the paper. Alright, then moving on with the lighter details on the bottom half. The right eye is a little darker than the left eye, just because of how the photograph I'm using is lit. So the right eye is a little bit more in shadow. So I'm going to try to recreate that by not adding too much light, bright details. Going in with this really nice red from Faber Castell again to hype up the vibrancy. Then I'm going in with the pupil. So again, starting with the base layer of black. Because this eye is darker, I couldn't really see as many different colors in the pupil as I could in the left eye. So I'm starting out with a darker base tone of black. I won't be adding a lot of colors on top of that anymore. I'm working on the shape of the pupil. They weren't really completely the exact same shape, so I adjusted the shape a little bit. And for a sharpener, by the way, I'm using a very simple sharpener from Derwent, just a manual one with 2 holes, a plastic sharpener. For me, I found that manual simple sharpeners just work the best. I do make sure to replace my sharpeners very often, because when they get dull, the pencils won't sharpen anymore, they will break. So make sure you use new sharpeners, and as soon as they get dull, replace them. I keep on working on the pupil and the top half of the eye to get it dark enough. So I keep switching between dark blue, dark purple, and then a little bit of dark gray. And I'm also cleaning up the shape of the highlight. Now it's time to add some color into the highlight, starting out again with this nice cobalt blue. And there are some very small dots of highlights on the iris as well, so I just put those in because my colors underneath aren't put on very thick. I can still add the lighter highlights quite easily, so I don't have to push hard. Using some white here for the first time, using some white from Faber Castell because it layers very well. And this way I can create some really nice small highlights. Also adding some of the lashes, the reflection of the lashes on the right eye, although you can't really see them on the reference, but I thought I did it on the left one, so let's do it on the right one as well. And then I'm coloring in the eyelid again, starting out with black. Make sure to keep my lines very clean, especially the transition between the iris colors and the black eyelids. I don't want those lines to be smudgy, I want them to be very clean. So I take quite some time for this. And I'm leaving the lighter spaces on the eyelids open. Although this eyelid, the eyelids of the right eye are very dark, so there aren't a lot of lighter spots there. Adding some lighter details using light gray. Also on the other eye. This will also give the eyelid some more texture. And then both eyes are finished. So now I can start doing the feathers around the eyelids and making sure that the eyes transition really well into the feathers around them. But that was it for the eyes and for this video. I hope you found it helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. If you're interested in the full real-time tutorial, that one is up for the $4 tier on Patreon. The total drawing took me about 4.5 hours to complete, so quite a lot actually for such a small drawing. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. You will see a pic of the finished piece in the next shot as well. And I really hope you enjoyed it. So let me know what you think of it, and I'll see you in the next video.